Okay, bringing us home this afternoon. Bringing us home.
Bring it on home.
To Earth and the world, Alexis Braun, Stewarding Imagination, Dancing with the Soul of the World.
Thank you.
Welcome, Alexis.
I'm so grateful Natalie went before me, so you can use her definitions throughout my talk. They work. Wake up to find out that you are the eyes of the world. These words come from the chorus of Eyes of the World, written by Grateful Dead master lyricist Robert Hunter. And this song has everything to do with what I will be speaking about today. 4 years ago, on a Friday afternoon, I spontaneously walked into my boss's office, thanked her, and resigned from my corporate job as a textile designer. A few weeks prior, I had returned home to San Francisco after attending the Grateful Dead Fare Thee Well concerts for their 50th anniversary. On closing night, percussionist Mickey Hart bid us farewell with this parting sentiment. He said, "The feeling we have here, remember it, take it home, do some good with it." I often joke that the Grateful Dead made me quit my job, and I'm certain I wouldn't have been the first. The truth is, I had been unhappy with my job for quite some time. Fueled by rabid materialism, the textile industry is one of the largest environmental polluters, wreaking havoc on multiple levels of our ecosystems, combined with equally demoralizing social implications. My profession was in direct opposition with my values. I had yet to develop the awareness to examine the layers of global impact of any and all product ultimately seated in the imaginations of the designers, often referred to as the creatives. Yet, as fate would have it, I miraculously stumbled upon the Philosophy, Cosmology, and Consciousness program here at CIIS. Truthfully, I still do not know how I got here, but I know for certain that I have found my way home. Our general instinct to seek and learn will, in all reason, set us inquiring into the nature of the instrument with which we search. I first came across this passage from Plotinus's Fourth Ennead while reading James Hillman's Revisioning Psychology. For me, Hillman quickly joined the ranks of rock gods with his anti-systematic and mythological musings. At this time, my own general instinct to seek and learn was rooted in an intuition best illustrated by Robert Zimmerman. The times they are changing, and so was I. I saw my entire life as fertile ground and began to till the soil of my soul through inquiry. What are my deepest beliefs, and how did they come to be? What are the core values guiding my life? Are these mine? And if not, where did they come from? And the simplest question of all, what is love? I ask these questions with genuine curiosity, humility, and truthfully, some shame. Shouldn't I just know the answers? Yet how could I expect to know answers to questions I had yet to ask? And then the shame deepened. Why had I not been asking these questions all along? I imagine these initial inquiries as rumblings from the unconscious, edging me towards the seated potential of my soul. I see the allurement of PCC as an outstretched limb from the anima mundi, beckoning me with a come hither gesture to join in the cosmic dance of creativity. I hadn't the faintest idea this invitation included a trip down the rabbit hole into the dark waters of psyche. Over the past 3 years, while simmering in the rich cauldron of PCC, I've begun to mine the past for clues to the images most alive in the present. Before finding a sense of home in the primal-like tribe known as the Grateful Dead, I had the good fortune of being raised on a steady diet of the Beatles and our Nobel laureate, Bob Dylan. The characters of these songs felt personal. Their stories comprised the myths of my childhood. From the confines of a bedroom in suburbia, I set sail on a magical mystery tour with a boy named Rocky Raccoon and a sergeant called Pepper. We weaved our way in a yellow submarine through a day in the life of an octopus's garden, cloaked in strawberry fields. I offer these playful musings as an example of the potential of the cosmic imagination to birth the possibility of the impossible. In our industrial society, it is a battle to escape childhood while remaining porous to the images of the unconscious. I was washed over by a wave of grief, growing aware that my own wild imagination had atrophied in the service of unhinged consumerism. It is my hope that by remembering how to steward the imagination, we may mature into a culture of initiated adults and wise elders. By gazing in the rearview mirror towards that fateful Friday 4 years ago, I now experience my resignation as larger than mine alone. I imagine it as a threshold crossing of raw material from the anima mundi pressing into the light of consciousness, like the rooted ones pushing up towards the sun through sidewalks cast in shadows along city streets. These unsolicited visits from Psyche are in no way concerned with your plans or deadlines, and much like a freshly painted wall and an unattended child with a box of crayons, nothing escapes an impression. I trust in the moment of resignation the voice of Jerry Garcia resounding in the recesses of my heart. Wake up to find out that you are the eyes of the world. As I echo these words once more, I can imagine Brian Swim, our beloved evolutionary philosopher, arms stretched wide, proclaiming, "Wake up to find out that you are the eyes of the cosmos." As Earth's communities face the unprecedented evolutionary challenges of our time, the current moment is calling our species to deepen into the perennial question, what does it mean to be human? By exploring this question, I am most interested in the paradoxical tension between the answers being personal and intimate as much as they are planetary and cosmological. I believe what lies at the taproot of our ecological, cultural, and spiritual crisis is deep hunger for connection and a crisis of meaning. I will explore the question of what it means to be human by sharing ways we can begin to apprentice ourselves to our words and images by participating in nature-based practices that help to ripen one's mythopoetic imagination. Through the evolution of consciousness, the inquiry into the nature of psyche has proven to be an enduring point of entry to the very essence of what it means to be human. However, in our postmodern era, it has become increasingly harder to distinguish between the authenticity of the images arising from the world's soul and from those we have been conditioned to digest as our essential needs and native desires. In Hillman's Revisioning Psychology, he writes, "Our judgments come from a tradition that has progressively depotentiated both images and words in order to maintain a particular vision of man, reason, and reality. This vision divides the world into objects and egos, giving to the soul no more than a pea-sized pineal gland to which island in the middle of the brain Descartes banished the psyche at the beginning of our modern period. When we court the muses, we may begin to trust the depth of meaning arising in our words and images." I want to pause here for a moment to discuss this word, psyche. This time last year, I grew aware of the disproportionate amount of time over the course of my graduate studies attempting to understand the cartography of psyche through definitions and theories rather than integrative and embodied practices. Inspired by this awareness, I began to explore nature-based ways of knowing so that I may learn to attune myself to the earth's ancient wisdom. The idea of these practices is that we may soften our industrial minds by entering into conversation and fostering intimacy with the earth and other than human communities. As Thomas Berry suggests, we must say of the universe that it is a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. The imagination is an essential ally in helping us to shift out of our human-centric visioning so that we may begin weaving ourselves back into the multi-centric web of life through offerings of love and reciprocity. I will illustrate the fruits of this practice by sharing a restoring of my personal biography. Until recently, I saw the beginning of my story as fairly mundane. I was born December 10th, 1977, in Tarzana, California. With this description, one can begin to imagine my birth much like a pin drop on Google Maps, roughly 500 miles south of where we are now. Yet, as I sat atop the rugged cliffs of Big Sur, mesmerized by the rhythmic humming of the Great Pacific, a new story began to emerge. With my imagination at the helm and my rational mind below deck, I remained porous to the numinosity of the images and musings arising in my consciousness. In the moment, I grew aware that I was seated at the midpoint from where I was born and the place I now call home. A mythopoetic identity was asking to unfurl. I arrived on this earth in the late fall under a dark moon on the westernmost edge of the North American continent. Here, where the wild ocean meets the jagged coastline and the sun bids us fare thee well each day as we perceive it slipping below the horizon. This expanding biography evoked a deep sense of gratitude and embeddedness in the very land that has held me for most of my life. Images and words are multivalent and undefinable message bearers, and when we allow them autonomy, they may guide us in making meaning of the ineffable. I believe that cultivating an intimate relationship with oneself is the cornerstone to radically re-envisioning what it means to be human. The nature-based practice I just illustrated helps us to expand our field of awareness by conjuring novel ways of perceiving. In revisioning psychology, Hillman writes, we tend to believe that psychologizing opposes participating, that instead of doing something about the world, psychology sees through it with interpretations. But when this opposition does occur in our lives, it is not because of an inherent enmity between idea and action, but rather because the action has a blind anti-psychological component and is being used to dodge psychological reflection. Sometimes we act in order not to see. Sadly, our industrial mind most often views progress as the achievement of blind actions yielding quantifiable results. When our actions lack self-reflexivity, we most often look past that which is most sacred. In return, we suffer the loss of intimacy once shared with all Earth's communities, finding ourselves in a state of amnesia, unable to recognize that we are the earth. In essence, we have forgotten how to love ourselves. The initial questions spiraling around my beliefs and values found fertile ground and began to take root through my studies in PCC. The shame of showing up late to the individuation party has now been washed away by a wave of gratitude for just showing up at all. The question of love is more alive today than when it first presented itself to me 4 years ago. In Hillman's essay, The Thought of the Heart and the Soul of the World, he suggests, when we fall in love, we begin to imagine. And when we begin to imagine, we fall in love. When the question of love first called for my attention, I was met with a simple answer. To love is to allow. When we dam the rivers, they are unable to flow. When we destroy the forest, they no longer may grow. And when we deplete the soil, no seeds can be sown. So if to love is to allow, the actions of our species are not ones that have been rooted in love. Humans tend to protect what they love. And when we fearlessly allow ourselves to dance in the wilds of the imagination, we may once again fall in love with the very nature of our origin. The message has long been resounding on the winds blowing through the untamed gardens of our souls. Wake up to find out that you are the eyes of the world. Thank you.
Are there questions for Alexis? Any questions?
What is love?
Do you want to say anything more about allowing at all?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I was first introduced to this really simple mantra when this question presented itself to me. And I find that when I'm in conflict, whether it's an external conflict or whether it's an internal conflict, I like to ask myself the question of what am I not allowing in this moment? And so it's complicated, but I think that when we can allow others to be as they are, as long as everything is done through kindness, then I think we can practice this self-reflexivity by asking, what am I not allowing in this moment? And it can pertain really anywhere, and I feel like it's worthy of inquiry.
Thank you, Alexis. Thank you.